It's time for story time again. This is going to be part 2 of Todd and Julie Chrisley. I really debated a while about whether or not I was going to do this part 2. I started thinking about it because of some pretty hateful comments I got on part 1 of the true story of Todd and Julie Chrisley. And in that, I talk about the factual aspects of their case and the pardon that they received. But really, I decided to go ahead and do this video because I think it speaks to a lot of what's going on in our society today about where people get really connected to someone they see on TV, and then they somehow believe that that is true or real. It might be in some instances, but facts are facts, and that's what I like to tell. I like to tell facts. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the Chrisley case, because some of the comments on my last videos were completely disconnected from, well, I guess from reality, certainly from the facts. So some people claim that the Chrisleys were set up. I don't even know what they mean by that. And that there was only one witness, and and that they were targeted because supposedly of who they are, and that Savannah Chrisley, which is the daughter, or a daughter, has some secret knowledge that proves their innocence, which I guess she didn't bring up at trial because they were convicted. So first of all, somebody brought up about the key witness, Mark Braddock, that he was the only witness, which is not true. And he wasn't just some rogue employee pointing fingers at Todd. He worked with Todd Chrisley for years to commit fraud, and he wasn't acting alone. He was working with the Chrisleys, specifically, as I understand it, Todd. He did, in fact, testify under immunity. Yes, that's true. But the government didn't rely on him alone. The trial included evidence of forged bank documents, inflated financial statements, and insanely crazy, they somehow prepared a fake IRS letter. And there was also multiple testimonies from different banks that they defrauded, as well as IRS officials. So let's be clear, the fraudulent activity didn't end when that employee Braddock left. The Chrisleys continued using fake financial documents, and they continued to get loans, and they continued to avoid's not the right word, evade paying taxes. This scheme, it lasted for many, many years. And like I said, past the time that Braddock was working for them. And the evidence did not come from just one guy. I had a commenter who said one guy. They had evidence from one guy and they were convicted. That's not true. It came from lots of documentation. There was just a ton of documentation that proved all of this fraud. And one of the most damning pieces of evidence was a fake IRS letter that the Chrisleys submitted to the banks. In this fake letter, it incorrectly and falsely stated that they didn't owe any back taxes when they actually owed taxes. And banks want to know that because they want to know who you owe money to. So this wasn't some sort of minor paperwork misunderstanding. It was deliberate. So anyway, the IRS showed the forged IRS letter, and that was a key part of the scheme to defraud the banks and the IRS. And what they did were serious federal crimes, and a major reason why they were convicted. So Julie also faced a separate charge for obstruction of justice, and this was because that she had submitted a backdated document during the investigation in an attempt to mislead the authorities. A jury agreed that it was a deliberate act to interfere with the investigation, and she was convicted on the charge. So a jury convicted her based on the evidence presented. So her conviction wasn't just on what Todd did, because a lot of people have said, oh, she didn't do it. She did stuff. So basically, she was convicted of steps she took to try and obstruct justice. That's what happens when you give fake documents during an investigation. So another point that was thrown around in these comments was about their Georgia tax situation. So let's go over that. So yes, in 2019, Georgia, they dropped its case and refunded the Chrisleys about $770,000. And why, you ask? Because someone at the Department of Revenue in Georgia, this is insane, people do this, but someone in the Department of Revenue improperly accessed their confidential information. And then I guess they disclosed it. And that was, of course, wrong, and the state owned up to it. And the Chrisleys even filed a lawsuit over the privacy breach, which was a legitimate grievance. It was legitimate for them to be upset about that. But that had nothing to do with the federal case or the federal charges. The federal case was based on the forged documents submitted to the banks and IRS fraud and hiding income in shell companies. So they were hiding income, they had illegal tax evasion, and they submitted forged documents to a bank to get money that they didn't deserve. So that's why they were convicted. And those were completely separate issues. Not even the same. And now let's talk about the appeals. There were appeals. It's not like they were just convicted and the Chrisleys didn't appeal it. They did. They appealed their convictions. So in June of 2024, the 11th Circuit Court upheld both of the convictions. The only exception was Julie's sentence. They found that the court had mistakenly held her responsible for bank losses from before she was proven to be involved. So her sentence was sent back for recalculation, and in September of 2024, the court re-sentenced her to 7 years. But nothing was overturned. Todd's 12-year sentence was fully upheld, and they didn't win their appeal. They lost. So as for people saying I should ask Savannah for the real story, I got that in a comment that I don't have all the facts and that I should ask Savannah. Well, here's the thing. Savannah has been extremely vocal, and she has every right to support her parents. She's made appearances on cable news, podcasts, and even spoke at the RNC. And she filed a lawsuit against Georgia over the confidentiality breach. Again, completely justified. She has the right to do all of these things. But she has also alleged a prosecutorial misconduct, claiming that the prosecutors, I shouldn't laugh over this. She's been claiming that the prosecutors were unfair, biased, or mishandled evidence during the trial. But here's the facts. Here's the reality. No court has found any prosecutorial misconduct in this case. None. The appeals court reviewed all claims thoroughly and upheld the convictions. Those claims have been reviewed. There's been plenty of times when courts have reviewed for misconduct and found misconduct, but not in this case. Savannah has not produced not a bank record, not a sworn statement, or any kind of court ruling. Nothing that debunks the original evidence. That's what more facts would actually mean. Not an emotional statement on a podcast or claims of bias without legal backing. She can't just say these things without providing some sort of evidence. I mean, she can say it, but should we believe it without some sort of proof? I mean, that's up to you, but certainly I don't believe things without proof. We deal in documentation and court records, not feelings. So regarding the claims that the Chrisleys were targeted, this argument has been pushed by their supporters and echoed by President Trump. The idea is that the Chrisleys, that they were singled out unfairly while everyone does it. That's the point I'm hearing from these people. Like, they were singled out and everyone does it. But what does that really mean? What does that mean? Do they believe all banks and federal agents and juries conspired against them? Is that what they believe? Or that every other person commits similar fraud but goes unprosecuted, even though they know about it? Well, that's not how the justice system works. Being caught and prosecuted isn't proof of being targeted. It's proof that wrongdoing was uncovered. If everyone does it, that is not a defense. It's an admission of guilt. Savannah and others have not clarified whether they think the crimes were made up or if they believe everyone else is also a criminal and only her parents were chosen for prosecution. So without facts, this remains just speculation and deflection. Also, interestingly and funny to me is that someone said I must hate Trump and that's why I've covered the case the way I had. I made a joke, admittedly, yes, a joke about Trump seeming to like people who skirt the law. And I pointed out that some of the Chrisley's conduct resembles what Trump was recently accused and convicted of, which was falsifying records, financial fraud, and then denying wrongdoing. That's not political, it's just legal reality. Those are all true statements, and pointing them out doesn't give me a bias one way or the other. And since we're on the topic, let's talk about the pardon that President Trump gave them. Let's get something straight about that. A pardon is not a declaration of innocence. A pardon forgives the sentence, not the crime. And legally, under the Supreme Court case, Verdict versus the United States, accepting a pardon implies an admission of guilt, people. So if someone gets a pardon, whether it's the Chrisleys or Trump or anyone else, it means they aren't being punished for it. Those are two different things. And so no, I am not apologizing for covering this case based on facts, even if it upsets you. If anything, more people should spend less time listening to fan podcasts and more time reading actual court documents or court records. You can feel however you want about the Chrisleys personally, but don't confuse loyalty with legal truths. So let me make you this promise. If new credible evidence comes out that disproves what was presented at trial, I'll gladly cover it. But so far, that hasn't happened. What has happened is a jury convicted them, an appeals court upheld the conviction, and although they have since been pardoned, that pardon doesn't erase the facts that were established in court. That's the truth. Deal with the facts, not your feelings. And on a final note, it's important to clarify that during the time their TV show was airing, they continued using shell companies to hide income and evade taxes. And these activities helped them to maintain the appearance of wealth and to support the lavish lifestyle that got them the show in the first place. So there's an understanding of why they did it. They needed to maintain this persona of a wealthy family when they may not have been. They weren't necessarily living off of fraudulent loans during the show, but the deception and the deceptive financial practices continued behind the scenes. If they hadn't obtained the loans under false pretenses earlier, they likely wouldn't have needed to file for bankruptcy. The banks wouldn't have given them those loans in the first place. So ultimately, their actions hurt the lenders, tax authorities, the public trust. The Chrisleys created a false image of wealth and success funded by fraud, which misled many and had real consequences beyond their personal lives. So that's how I feel about this. Come at me if you want. These are the facts. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you hated this video, do a thumbs down and comment all you want. I'm all over that too. I'll see you next time.